Okay, hi, welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. And as ever, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves.
Hi there, Andy. It's great to be with you on this and looking forward to chatting through some topics. I'm Samuel Williams. I do a lot of different things, but I spend most of my time with Christian Aid, running the SALT Business Network. So that's working with predominantly Christian business leaders who want to absolutely use their businesses and private sector skills as a force for good in the world, but sometimes feel like they're lacking the support, the knowledge, the networks for that. And so we create that network and support and encourage them in that. So I do that. I have a background in the church. I originally trained to be a vicar. And so I have a undergrad and postgrad in theology, but didn't do that. I tumbled out of university to start a company, a communications firm, and was running that for quite a few years before I joined Christian Aid. And then in my part-time, as my spare time, I am standing as the Conservative mayoral candidate for the city of Bristol for the elections next year in 2021.
Goodness. Okay, so you've got loads of spare time for that, I'm sure. Okay, so this series we've been talking about asking people to reflect on one big thing that either as a result of COVID or influenced by the COVID situation has been enhanced. Maybe it's something they've had to stop that they really want to pick up. Maybe something they've stopped that they want to just carry on dropping and then pick up again, or something that was bubbling away in the background and has been brought to light in new ways. What is your one big issue?
I have a lot of big issues, I should think, really. But one of the things that's really struck me over this time, in relation to my work, but also in relationship to my relationships and human interaction, is this thing that we're doing right now, engaging over digital, online, the use of Zoom or Teams or other video platforms, and the way that that's fundamentally changed our human interaction. And one of the things that I've been really interested by and learning a lot about is how this way of communicating, whilst it brings a lot of benefits in some ways, it means that I can still see your face. It's not just over the phone as it was once before. In times gone by, I can see your face, and there's huge added value to that. Business can continue, whatever that business might be, but we lose something really key and fundamental to our human interaction, the unspoken, the informal, the happenstance sort of stuff that just happens that you don't plan for, but actually you suddenly, when you think back at things, you say to yourself, wow, that was the bit that was really important, powerful, meaningful, life-changing, business-changing, whatever, those informal things. And I don't think that these kind of systems can recreate that very well. We seem to tend towards something much more formal.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think that there's something about the enforced and unavoidable formality of this process. You know, we've had to book in a time, we've had to agree a time frame of how long the discussion is going to take. We've had a quick discussion before we start recording about what we might talk about, and everything's kind of really tightly framed. And I guess a lot of those and that's fine if we're able to be more focused in. And as you say, there's other advantages in terms of nobody's got to travel miles and miles and miles to meet face to face, all that kind of stuff. But there is that risk to spontaneity, isn't there? Those, I can think of conferences I've been on, for example, where I might have taken away something really useful and challenging from a keynote speaker, but actually the thing I've really took home with me is a new friendship that I've met over a drink, or over a cup of coffee, or queuing for a cake or something, or in a breakout space where we were meant to be talking about something focused, but we ended up talking about something, a common interest that we've just discovered we had. And we don't have that on Zoom. You can't artificially create it, or if you do try and artificially create it, it remains artificial. It just doesn't, it's not quite the 3 dimensions that we would have in real life.
Right, exactly right. And we see this phenomena, I think, in society a lot. the power of the informal, the importance of the informal. I think about politics and society, and think about some of the marches or demonstrations or laments almost that you hear on Facebook or Twitter, or you speaking to people, and the frustrations that are often expressed. And what's interesting, the thing that you'll often hear is, he's not my prime minister, or they don't speak for me, or no, that's not what I think, or don't speak on my behalf. This type of thing, this sort of disconnect, and it often gets presented as the government or a particular politician or whoever it might be not understanding the people.
Yeah.
But what we need to recognise in any societal structures, whether that is a business, a charity, a family, or society as a whole, is that when you're trying to communicate and develop a policy, do we all go to the beach, or do we all go to eat at Harvester, or do we engage with COVID in this way? When you're engaging with a decision that affects multiple people, the decision makers are always dealing in simplification. Always. You always have to deal in generalities and simplifications. You look at the whole and say, okay, what decision can I make that benefits the most people in that sort of way, or has the most benefit for all? You have to bear all opinions in mind, but you can't deliver a policy that engages with everybody individually, because then that's a one-for-one map, isn't it, of everyone's opinion. It doesn't work. And so I think we're in this really difficult position where we all want to feel like we're being heard and understand and related to in our businesses, in our workplaces, that sort of stuff. But actually Zoom or Teams or the online medium that we're engaging with one another doesn't easily enable us to do that. And so my fear is, because it's so formal, like you said, we err towards the formal, because we lose the informal kind of communication in the coffee line or the cake line or whatever. And so I think there's a real fear. The danger I recognize is that we will start slipping through in our business settings or in our workplace settings to a place where people feel less heard, less understood, and less engaged with, because we quite simply can't have those you matter conversations over coffee or cake or the water cooler. Rather, we've slipped through into a position in which the powers on high disseminate information. You listen on a 2D screen, and then you have 2 minutes to offer a response, either in the chat or via the video. And so we lose the informal, and I think we in turn lose the individual engagement as well, which I fear will lead to maybe some of the tragedy that we see in the streets unfolding in some of the marches and stuff we've seen recently, where people are saying, I'm not heard, you're not hearing me, you don't see me. I think there's a danger of that. I don't think I'm over egging the pudding there by suggesting this.
Well, no, it's interesting as you were saying that. I started reflecting on some of the accusations that have been made about social media in general over the last few years, as it's become so central to how much so many of us do. And again, we have the same argument about it. It's a source for great good. I've been on record as saying, when I had really severe mental health incident, Twitter genuinely saved my life, because whenever it was, I could go online and arguably maybe a cry for help or just something, and people would interact. And of course, there were some people interacting less positively, but there were always people reaching out really positively. So I'm really a big fan of that kind of social media. But one of the criticisms is that we deal in caricatures of each other all the time. We present a caricature of ourselves, and we meet only a caricature of the other. And of course, that means any kind of us and them divide that pre-exists only bigger. One of my reflections before pandemic was, it's not just a UK thing, but it's certainly the Western world. I think this kind of idea that nuance is disappearing, You know,
Right.
there's a polarization, whether it's political, social, economic, whatever criteria we're talking about, where you're either here or you're here, and there's no space to explore what common ground is. So, you know, I like you, trained to be a minister in the Church of England, and like you, didn't end up getting ordained. And one of my closest friends on the 3 years that I studied was a lady, different age bracket to me, different political spectrum to me by quite some extreme. And we actually bonded because I made a joke, probably not a very nice joke actually in retrospect, at her expense, when she made a statement about her political opinion. But she took the time to kind of talk to me about it, and because I hadn't meant it as a personal thing, we kind of got past that awkwardness really, really quickly. And although we remained very different on a lot of things, we discovered that the common ground, we discovered that actually there probably was more that we had in common than we had that set us apart. And of course, that's always true in humanity. We've got so much in common, but we're drawn to those differences. And maybe that's one of the dangers of this kind of thing, and the lack of that informal space that you're talking about is, you know, you've got 5 minutes on screen to get to know me. Whatever caricature, unconsciously or consciously, that I'm presenting of myself, that's the only me you're going to get to know. And you may never interact with me again. Whereas even at, you know, we've used an example of a conference before. You know, you might bump over a 2-day conference, you might bump into the same person several times, end up at the same meal table with them. And you might not become bosom buddies. But again, that common ground is really, it comes through really forcefully, doesn't it?
Right.
How do we, you know, given the reality that this is how it's going to be for a while, even if things return to whatever normal is or becomes or was, the kind of the online interaction is going to remain front and center of a lot of what we do personally and professionally. How can we recognize those challenges that you started to talk about, and how can we offer some solutions, or at least offer some kind of hope or way of making it work better than maybe it has been the last 2 or 3 months?
Yeah. And it might sound almost counterintuitive to what I've been suggesting thus far, but I would suggest the answer is probably to push in rather than to pull away.
Yeah.
In that we wouldn't probably be doing this if it wasn't for this change of norm.
Yeah.
The cropping up of these type of engagements have become much easier because of the boom of various platforms like this. And so I've seen some fantastic conversations, recorded conversations. I've been part of some fantastic conversations because we've been engaging with this way, through this way. And it's become much easier because I don't need to jump on a train to London, or I don't need to go to the studio, or I don't need to engage in some of the ways that previously was just felt like that's the way you deliver these conversations. We don't have to wait for the yearly conference to chat. We can relatively easily create a situation that we can have these conversations. And so whilst it's challenging, and whilst we need to learn how to read body language when we're splitting between looking at the webcam and then down at the picture and all of these kind of things, actually, as we learn to do that more, as we learn to do that better, as technology responds to the changing environment and will inevitably get better, innovations almost always, the best innovations almost always come out of times of challenge. I have no doubt we'll see some much better innovations coming up soon, more slick, streamlined ways of doing this. I think it will only open up opportunities for more informal conversations and interactions. So we must allow for it, is my view.
Okay, well, I find that really helpful, and I mean we're nearly out of time, so there's that kind of that's something really hopeful, isn't it? Is that, you know, we recognise the challenges. We've mentioned, or at least acknowledged, that there are a lot of strengths in this format. And you know, I think you mentioned earlier that kind of idea of a lament. So for me, that would be really important that we find a way, individually and collectively, to appropriately mourn the things that we've lost, some of which we won't get back, or we won't get back in the same way, but then to embrace the technology, not because we're stuck with it, but because actually, as you say, you know, technology, any new any new technology has always been met with the same criticism, you know, where it stops us doing things. I remember seeing a cartoon about people reading newspapers on public transport when newspapers became really popular because it was going to stop social interaction. And we've had the same thing about phones and MP3 players and so on and so forth. So come to embrace the positive, but maybe to keep asking away at the, how do we manage informal space on a formal platform? I don't think the answers are there yet. I suspect that we'll try some things that will fail heroically before we find something that works. And like anything that does work for some people won't work for other people as well. So that's going to be an important thing to hold in tension. That's really helpful, Sam. As with all of these conversations I've had, I feel really energized by this. I'm really conscious that there's a conference in this discussion, you know, there's all kinds of ways we can mine it. But from today, our time is up. So I wish you luck with your, with the various things that you're juggling, the many, many hats that you're wearing at the moment, and with personal time and space to do that creativity and reflection as well. Sam Williams, bless you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.